If it's Monday night, it must be Frito pie with Wolf brand chili.
I made it just the way you like it. Perfect.
Well, at least the brown Betty was good.
You must give me recipe.
Oh, Min, you know I can't do that. We are having Spa-peggy and meatballs.
Did she say Spa-peggy?
Well, Spa-peggy is a lot like spaghetti. I'm not sure what Peggy does different, if anything.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the favorite foods of Rainy Street's own matriarch, boggle champion, and two-time substitute teacher of the year, Peggy Hill. Starting with a Texas favorite, Frito pie, which requires Wolf brand chili, 2 cans worth. This stuff is really, really thick, so dig it on out with a spoon. Looks lovely. And we're covering that and heating it to a bare simmer, during which time we are needlessly measuring out our bag of Fritos, about 4 cups worth I'd say, and buttering up a large glass pie plate. Then believe it or not, there is only one ingredient left in this thing, and that is cheese. And trust me, I agonized over which cheese to use. Hank Hill's favorite, Pepper Jack, or Yellow American, the thing that I'd really imagined Peggy Hill would use. On the one hand, she said, I made it just the way you like, aka with Hank's favorite cheese, but then again, Peggy is incredibly stubborn and stuck in her ways. In the end, I gotta go Yellow American. It's what I think she would use. Do I recommend you use it? No, I would use cheddar or pepper jack. Anywho, we were starting by layering half of our chili on the bottom of our pie plate, followed by half of our Fritos, followed by half of our cheese, 5 slices. This is going to give the Fritos some degree of protection against the final layer of chili, during what would seem to be a pretty unnecessary stint in the oven. 375 for 20 minutes, according to every recipe I could find. 20 minutes later, and it emerges looking darker, and at this point we are applying one final layer of cheese and, of course, Fritos. Then we're popping it back in the oven for another 5 minutes just to get everything all melty and to crisp up the top layer. And that's it, we just gotta let her cool off for 5 minutes before scooping and serving. Now, I know you guys were probably expecting me to remake this with homemade tortilla chips and artisanal cheeses and hand-curated chili, but Frito pie is a recipe that does not need improving upon, except for maybe the cheese. This ended up being really gluey and dry and kind of gross. So bring it to your next Texas potluck, but do yourself a favor and use cheddar. Next up, we're taking our best approximation at Spa-peggy and meatballs. If I had to guess, I'd say that Peggy made meatballs the same way that every mom did back in the 90s. Store-bought ground beef, egg, breadcrumbs, splash of milk, little sprinklings each of garlic powder, onion powder, oregano, and dried basil, all the usual meatball suspects. Like most things in life, we are seasoning with salt and freshly ground pepper, and then it's time to mix this whole affair together by hand. Oh, wait a minute, I almost forgot the most important part, just the right amount of Parmigiano cheese. And I'm assuming that she uses this junk that comes in a bottle. Anyway, once we've got our meatball dough did I just call this meatball dough? I guess that's what it is. Once we've got our meatball dough well kneaded, it's time to divide into small mouth-sized balls. And Peggy never makes any claims to be Italian, so I'm guessing that she's baking her meatballs instead of frying them. While those bake at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 to 20 minutes, we're gonna make an ultra simple tomato sauce. I would have bet any amount of money that she would use jarred sauce, but she mentioned adding just the right amount of sugar. So we're finely mincing an onion, sweating it, adding garlic at the last second, sauteing for 30 seconds or until fragrant, and then adding a can of crushed tomatoes. And then we're gonna simmer that for at least 30 minutes. Now, the only reason people add sugar to tomato sauce is to attempt to combat acidity, which doesn't actually work, but it does help round out and mask the acidity of undercooked sauces. So once you've got this seasoned with salt, pepper, and sugar to your personal taste, it's time to add the meatballs back to the sauce. This is both going to finish cooking them, and it's going to lend some of their meaty flavor. So we're making sure these guys are well coated, and we're covering and simmering for another 15-20 minutes. Once those are almost done, it's time to get our pasta cooking. I've got some thin spaghetti here that I'm going to boil for 1 minute less than is recommended to me by the manufacturer's suggested cooking instructions, reserving a half a cup of pasta water towards the end of cooking. This is going to help the sauce adhere to our now drained pasta. First, I'm going to set aside the meatballs for a moment because we're going to plate those up with the spaghetti later. I'm going to add most of the pasta water to the awaiting pasta and then start adding the sauce, realizing halfway through that there's got to be a more efficient way than just scooping it out using my measuring cup. But onward and upward, we're tossing that all together and then preparing to plate. We're scooping all our spaghetti into a large serving bowl, topping with our meatballs, and of course, the requisite heavy snow of bottled Parmesan cheese. And before you can say the name of Arlen's most romantic restaurant, that's Amore, you've got Spa-peggy and meatballs, which is, of course, just spaghetti and meatballs, but that doesn't really matter, does it? It all comes down to how it tastes. And how does it taste? Well, It tastes like spaghetti and meatballs, like every spaghetti and meatballs your parents have ever made for you. And you know what? That's okay. Not only is it a nice nostalgia trip, but what is that old saying? If you can't handle spaghetti at its worst, you don't deserve it at its best. Plus, I hadn't eaten anything all day at this point, and I was really, really hungry, so congratulations, Peggy, you got yourself a member of the Clean Plate Club. But I have absolutely no doubt that Apple Brown Betty will also join those ranks. We're starting with about a half a pound of brown sugar, to which we're going to add 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, half a teaspoon ground ginger, a quarter teaspoon ground allspice, and maybe an eighth teaspoon of ground cloves, along with a nice shake of table salt. We know for a fact that she doesn't put any nutmeg in there because of that meddling Min Sufenusenphone. Next up, we've got to peel, core, and slice between 7 to 10 Granny Smith apples. It's going to depend on the size of your recipe, the size of your baking vessel, all that good stuff. Just chop up a whole bunch of apples, okay? I'm cutting mine into slices. You can cut yours into chunks. Just live your life. One thing you for sure don't want to skip is buttering your casserole or pie dish. Before layering down about half of your apples, enough to cover the bottom of the casserole and then some, then we're going to sprinkle a whole bunch of the brown sugar mixture on top, along with a sprinkling of breadcrumbs. I know this sounds weird, but this is how Brown Betty is traditionally made, and the breadcrumbs give the filling some body while also giving the top a faux crust. So we're layering in the rest of our apples, the rest of our brown sugar, and maybe solid 3/4 of a cup of breadcrumbs, and then we're topping that with a whole stick of butter sliced thinly. You don't have to be as organized as I'm being right now. This is a very forgiving recipe, and it will forgive you of any baking sins you might commit. So we're baking this at 375 Fahrenheit for about 20 minutes covered, followed by 15 minutes uncovered, and we're left with this, Apple Brown Betty, in all of its sweet, crunchy, bubbly goodness. I have a particular soft spot for this dish because I used to make it all the time back in college, because you might have noticed you only need a baking dish and a knife to make it. Plus, it's only got like 7 ingredients if you include the spices, 8 if you include a nice scoop of ice cream on top, and it's a super easy and economical way to get a homemade apple pie equivalent on the table in under an hour. I hope you guys give this one a try yourselves. It's one of the things that first sort of encouraged me to try cooking. Just promise me that you won't use it to try and poison Randy Travis.